At this time, I would like to introduce Lexington Mayor Jim Gray for a few welcome remarks and recognition of some other guests that we have with us. Mayor Gray.
Thanks, Bob. Hey, it's great to see. This is quite a crowd today. This is great. How many of y'all are from out of this, beyond the city limits? Okay, just a quick show of hands. Well, there's a lot from inside the city limits. So that means that I may have to go off script a little bit. I was going to say welcome to Lexington and remind those who are from out of town that this is a city that has a long history. Settled in 1775, 238 years ago, 1 year before the Declaration of Independence itself was signed, which means that we have been in business for a long time. And that means, and it tells us and confirms that we're going to stay in business, doing things the right way. I will remind those that as we sit here in the Patterson, right? It is Patterson, right? I thought I was still at the right place. That our city was settled around the town branch, which is probably trickling right below us, Alan Stein. I think you told me that. Shake your head. Thank you, sir. Yes. All right. Well, Bob, you have already introduced the collection of our state officers who are going to share their thoughts with us shortly. In addition to our state officials who are here, elected officials of our state, I want to recognize that we have some of our newest local leaders here with us today, Siobhan Akers, Harry Clark, and Jennifer Scutchfield, members of our city council. I think Bill Farmer is here. I was just with him at the dedication of, is Bill Farmer arrived? I thought I heard his laugh. Yes, I did hear his laugh. Lord William Farmer of Chevy Chase Province. He is with us today. Thank you, sir. So our city also depends on strong leadership from the state legislature. So here today, join me in recognizing Senator Kathy Stein and Senator Jared Carpenter from Berea. All right. Thank you all. And also state representatives Bob Damron from Nicholasville, Ruth Ann Palumbo and Kelly Flood right here from Lexington, and Kim King from Harrodsburg. Let's recognize these guys. And finally and quickly, but importantly, representation today from our congressional delegation in Washington. Regina Stivers representing Senator McConnell, Dan Bynes representing Senator Paul, and Amanda Millward representing Representative Andy Barr. Let's give them a thanks. So, welcome to everybody, and thank you, Bob and Commerce Lexington, for putting this all together. Thanks, guys. You bet.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Policy Luncheon Series has become a signature event for Commerce Lexington over these last few years. These events would not be possible without the generosity of some very committed sponsors. Their support ensures we're able to offer first-rate events, and this is no exception. I would like to start by thanking Cheryl Norton and Kentucky American Water, our presenting sponsor. I'm going to have Cheryl come up in just a minute. But first, I want to recognize our other committed sponsors. Our platinum sponsors, Baptist Health, Life Point Hospitals, and PNC Bank. Our gold sponsors, AT&T, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Kincaid Stills, PLLC, UBS, and the University of Kentucky, all gold sponsors. Our silver sponsors, Bluegrass Airport, Comfort Heating and Air, the Commonwealth Health Management, Fifth Third Bank, Kentucky Community and Technical College System, Kentucky Utilities Company, Lexington Center Corp., Ray Foley Hensley and Company, Sheehy and Associates, Stein Group LLC, Top Marketing Group LLC, Travel Host of the Bluegrass, WKY 91.3 FM, and our small business sponsors, Babbage Co-Founder, Missing Link Managed Services, and Progressive Marketing. Let's give a round of applause to all of our sponsors. And now it's my honor to introduce Cheryl Norton with Kentucky American Water, our presenting sponsor for today's luncheon, for a few remarks. Cheryl.
Thank you, Bob. And I just want to say thanks to Bob and Andy and the whole Commerce Lexington team that has done another fantastic job of pulling together this event. We're so proud to be sponsors of this event and to have such a great group of our younger leaders here. We're just very, very excited to be here today. And as we think about what we're going to hear today, you know, we were talking within our staff about some of the things that are going on. And from the water industry, just like from most of the other industries, the solutions to the problems that we face are not solutions that are going to be fixed overnight. They're things that are going to take a very long time. Our infrastructure across the United States is in very poor shape, not just with roads and bridges, the things that you can see, but also with water and wastewater infrastructure. And how can we as a private utility help be a solution for that in different ways for water and wastewater, but also how can we help through legislation and just doing the right things and being good stewards of the systems that we own and operate and being a good part of the community, a good community leader. So, you know, but as we think about that and the long-term nature of that, it's very exciting for us to have these up-and-coming leaders that are going to take us to that next level. They're the ones who are going to be helping us to deal with those long-term solutions to these very, very large problems. So we're really excited to have you guys here, and we really appreciate all the things you've done so far and what you promise for us in the future. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for being here. I hope you really enjoy the speakers today. And as a reminder, please complete the survey that you found on your chair before you leave. We would really appreciate that. And you guys have a great day. Have a nice lunch.
Good afternoon. I'm Carla Blanton. I'm chair of Commerce Lexington's Public Policy Committee. And what we do there is just to help provide guidance in terms of deciding policy decisions and setting legislative agenda priorities and guiding those efforts. Thanks for attending the luncheon today. I too am very excited that we have this group together. It's very rare that they're all in the same room. I'm guessing it's probably maybe fabled events such as the ham breakfast and Fancy Farm, where the last time you guys have all been together. The crowd will be just a little bit more hospitable today, I can promise you that. And those functions also did not have Sean Cutter as moderator. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Sean, who will serve as the moderator today and explain the format. Sean is Director of MML&K Government Solutions, the Public and Government Affairs practice of McBrayer Law Firm. A Frankfort native and a graduate of Center College in Danville, Sean has 16 years of experience working with Kentucky policymakers, and he's become a trusted advisor on issues ranging from agriculture to healthcare to telecommunications. Prior to his work with MML&K, Sean worked as a policy analyst, writer, and coordinator for Midwest Government Affairs for the Council of State Governments, which is based here in Lexington. Sean currently serves on the board of the Kentucky Association of Hospice and Palliative Care and of ARC of Kentucky, two very valuable human service delivery organizations in the Commonwealth. He's also a past member of the Alumni Board of Center College. Sean lives with his wife, Mary Beth, and their two children, Amelia and Sam, in Frankfort. Sean, thanks for helping organize today's program. We look forward to an interesting discussion with a dynamic group.
Thanks, Carla. Little known fact, Carla and I actually worked together for a while. She was a lobbyist in Frankfort and got a little bit of a bad taste maybe for the lobbying and left us very abruptly. So I'm glad she's here today. It's always good to see her. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the latest installment of Commerce Lexington's very exciting and informative Public Policy Luncheon Series. Today we're featuring a roundtable discussion with all but two of Kentucky's constitutional officers. While these individuals offer a broad array of talent and experience to the rest of the state, and it's an honor for me to know all of these outstanding folks, both personally and professionally. I'm pleased that so many leaders from the public and private sector showed up this afternoon to learn a bit more about what I feel is a very intelligent, talented, and interesting group of Kentuckians. Now, this event actually came about out of a exciting tour that happened last year of the Central Kentucky delegation to Frankfort. We had a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce, and out of that came a discussion about the constitutional officers, the youth that existed there, and the new and exciting ideas that were coming forth from that group. So I'm glad that we were able to put them all together today and bring them here before you. It's a tribute to the staff that they got everyone's calendars synced up and brought them here today. I don't know if you know what a yeoman's effort that is to get everybody on the same page. Everybody sitting here at the head table has an extremely busy schedule. So at this point, I'd like to ask our guest speakers to come forward and be seated. And while they're doing so, I'd like to tell you that this is the first time that all of these folks have appeared together in a public forum. It's a testament, again, to the strength of the Commerce of Lexington organization. It also speaks to the level of respect that these elected officials have for the Central Kentucky business leaders that are here today. We'll give all the officers an opportunity to provide you a bit of background on their lives, but I'll introduce them in short form now, and I'm going to take the stage. I'm having a bit of back problems, so I think these hard chairs are doing me just a wonderful job. So once I get seated there, I might not be able to get up. So if someone would come forth and help me get out of my seat after everyone has left, I'd appreciate that. Again, I'm going to give a little bit of a bio on each participant today. James Comer is a cattle farmer from Monroe County. He was elected Kentucky's Commissioner of Agriculture in November of 2011 after serving more than a decade in the State House. Comer requested an audit of his own department and completely overhauled the agency, emphasizing transparency and accountability. He then took on a job creation agenda that included industrial hemp legislation that passed the legislature overwhelmingly in 2013. And his new Kentucky Proud branding initiatives, such as Homegrown by Heroes, continue to expand markets for local farmers across Kentucky. Jack Conway was elected to a second term as the 49th Attorney General of Kentucky in November 2011. Conway continues to work with local leaders and law enforcement officers to make Kentucky a safer place to live, work, and raise a family. During his service as Attorney General, he has fought for legislation focused on prosecuting child predators, cracking down on internet crimes, addressing cyber safety, and fighting illegal drugs and prescription drug abuse. Adam Edelen was sworn in as Kentucky's 46th Auditor of Public Accounts in 2012, following stints as head of the Kentucky Office of Homeland Security and as Governor Beshear's Chief of Staff. He's kept his promise of serving as a vigorous taxpayer watchdog. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to say vigorous, so I'm very
Congratulations
pleased that I did that.
Thank a teacher.
Bringing historic reform to a $2.7 billion layer of government, billion-dollar layer of government, tackling fraud and abuse in our public schools, holding big insurance companies more accountable, and much more. Alison Lundergan Grimes serves as Kentucky's 76th Secretary of State and is the only current female constitutional officer. She has a lifelong commitment to public service, and as Kentucky's chief election official, she has helped pass laws to maintain election integrity and protect the voting rights of the military and overseas citizens, victims of domestic violence, and absentee voters. As the Commonwealth's Chief Business Officer, she has successfully advocated for legislation that updates and streamlines business entity laws, giving the green light to the small businesses that keep Kentucky growing. Secretary Grimes also recently announced that she'll be running for U.S. Senator in 2014, for those of you who did not know. Todd Hollenbach is the 40th Treasurer of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. He was first elected in 2011 and again in 2007 and re-elected again in 2011. During Treasurer Hollenbach's time in office, he has focused Treasury's efforts on technological modernization. I was worried about that one as well. The financial literacy of Kentucky's youth and the creation of the Treasurer Finders program. Treasurer Finders is a proactive outreach program that has dramatically improved the state's efforts to return unclaimed property to its rightful owners. Recently, Treasurer Hollenbach has become a national leader in the fight against Washington's desire to change the current tax-exempt status of municipal bonds. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I do understand how difficult it is to get your schedules to jive, and we really appreciate you all being here. It's really a treat for us to be able to sit here and learn a little bit more about you today. The first couple of questions I'd like to prompt you all with will be directed at everyone, and I'll just start down at your end of the table, Jamie. Could you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and professional life prior to public service? What important moment or person inspired you to become involved in public service?
All right, well, thank you, Sean, and thank you, Commerce Lexington, for the invitation to be here. My grandparents inspired me. Both my grandfathers were businessmen. One was in the construction business and one was in the lumber business. And they also had farms. They were very involved in local politics. They were big fans of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan, and they became active in the local Republican parties in their respective counties. And I grew up with them. I enjoyed farming and enjoyed government and politics. So I wanted to be in business, also farm, and someday be in politics. So when I was 27, after years of going to school and volunteering in a lot of elections and growing up with the 4-H and FFA scene, showing livestock at the local shows and county fairs and state fairs and all that, I was involved in government and agriculture. So I ran for state representative at 27 years of age against the wife of the incumbent in a primary and won, and served 6 terms in the General Assembly, and then was fortunate enough to be elected in 2011 Ag Commissioner. So my grandparents had a big inspiration on me to be involved in public service and stand up for conservative values and pro-business legislation.
Thanks, Jamie. Jack?
Well, Sean, thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you to Commerce Lexington for having me. I was brought up by 2 remarkable people, my parents, Tom and Barbara Conway, who've been married for about 48 years now. My father's originally from Western Kentucky, went and served in Germany in the 1960s and came back and put himself through law school at night on the GI Bill while teaching history during the day at Fairdale High School in Louisville. My mom is a daughter of a union blacksmith who worked 47 years at the old L&N Railroad in Louisville, and on her side of the family, I'm the first to go to college. So the upbringing I received from them really instilled in me, I think, the idea that you have to work hard and work hard on behalf of others, and you have to work hard to achieve what you want to in life. Along the way, I had a number of people who were influential to me. Obviously, my parents were hugely influential. I had a teacher in high school, a guy by the name of John Price, who was my history and civics teacher, who sort of brought me along to that phrase that Harry Truman used to always utter, which is that the only thing that's new is the history you don't know. And the interaction of what happened in the past and the way it informs our decisions in the present was very appealing to me. So I think that really first focused me on public policy. And then along the way, there were really 3 individuals in public service that took me under their wing and taught me how things ought to be done. The first was Paul Patton, who I served as Deputy Cabinet Secretary and Legal Counsel to for about 6 years. Spending 6 years with Paul Patton was like spending 6 years in public policy boot camp. I mean, you had to be there at 7 in the morning, you left about 8 or 9 at night, and he really reinforced in me that work ethic that I think my parents first taught me. The second was Crit Llewellyn, who was the Cabinet Secretary. She was so organized and taught me that no meeting in Frankfurt ought to wind up without people knowing what was decided and what the next steps are. So oftentimes people in Frankfurt just meet and they don't reach any conclusions. So Crit really taught me how to run a meeting and how to be organized. And finally, Wendell Ford. Wendell Ford has long been a mentor to me since I was in high school when I first met him. He really helped me understand the way people ought to be treated, that even if you're an elected official, you treat everyone the same, no matter whether you're talking to a head of state or someone that's working the elevator, to be honest with you. And so those three individuals saw something in me at some point about a decade ago where they encouraged me to first run for office. And, if it hadn't been for their encouragement, I don't think I would be here today.
Great. Adam?
I had sort of this asymmetrical childhood. My mother had me when she was 16 years old. My dad is a farmer, and when my folks split, as inevitably sort of happens when you get together at that age, my mother moved to Louisville, and my dad remains on the family farm that we've had for a couple hundred years. And to divorce any of you of the notion that I'm somehow a gentleman farmer, this is a row crop and dirt farm. I know Jamie knows the difference, but bouncing back and forth between these two very different worlds, what I learned from parents who had a great deal in differences, what they did have in common was an extraordinary work ethic. And what I learned bouncing back in between these two worlds, Bob, you and I have talked about this before, is an appreciation for all people and being comfortable with all people, and a recognition that no matter who you are or where you came up in life or how wealthy your folks are, that there is a sense that we are all God's children, that everybody has value. And that's why I'm comfortable pretty much wherever I find myself, which is a good trait for a politician. Now, if any of you know anything about farmers, you know that there are no babysitters on a farm, and I would spend my lunches with my grandfather, my great uncle, and my dad. And farmers talk about three things. They talk about the weather, they talk about UK basketball, and they talk about politics. Now, if any of you grew up in a similar setting, you know that Paul Harvey would come on and do his broadcast at noon, and you'd listen to the day's events, you'd get your take, and then there would be a vigorous argument about what we just heard. And it was kind of against that backdrop that I earned an interest in the world beyond us, beyond just that little farm or that part of Louisville that I grew up in the other part of the year. And that's from where it evolved a real interest in public policy and interest in politics, and it's been a lifelong interest of mine. I've had a number of opportunities. Jack and I both worked as young aides to Paul Patton. But if it was that background that sort of conspired to interest me in public service, it was the skill sets I learned in business that I think have made me a better public servant. An awful lot of people who aren't familiar with business will tell you that you can't run government like a business. That might be true, but you can certainly run it with business principles, with a focus on the bottom line. You can run government with a belief that we can agitate for a more efficient, more honest operation that at the end of the day gives the taxpayers a better product for what they pay for. And that's a lesson that I don't think you learn naturally in politics. I think it's a lesson that you don't naturally learn in government. You learn it in an environment where you know what it means to go all in, what it means to sweat the mortgage or the payroll, what it means to understand the need to restructure an organization in a difficult economy. So if my background from my parents, what I learned is what brought me to public service. Certainly the background and experiences that I've had in business, both here. I should have made sure this got in the bio. I'm a former vice president of the very organization that brought us all here today. And Bob, I can remember when we couldn't get 300 people at our annual dinner. So this is an extraordinary accomplishment. But I think what we need at the end of the day are more people in government who have a bottom line business perspective and an orientation towards getting things done rather than talking.
Thanks, Adam. Secretary Grimes.
Thank you, Sean, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure and privilege to be here today, and while you enjoy your lunch, we will all work for hours up here at this front table. I told them, though, don't touch my dessert. I will be back for that dessert.
It's a privilege to be here. I want to thank Commerce Lexington for bringing all of us together. It is on few occasions that we get to be at such great settings talking about how we all got here and what we are doing, and most importantly, how we're moving the Commonwealth forward. Many of you that are here in this room, you have seen me grow up. You know that from the young age where I could read, that's literally why I have glasses today, I've been reading precinct lists. And the moment I could walking door to door, not just in Lexington, but across the counties of the Commonwealth to help turn out the vote. My notion of public service, though, was formed just a few buildings down from where we are here today. And it's because of family, family, family. That's what you've heard over and over again. I was blessed and fortunate enough to be a part of a family that realized before we sat down for Thanksgiving to celebrate a holiday, we served hundreds of meals, and still do today, to those that were less fortunate than us. That work is what shaped a lot of the work that I did as a practicing attorney. I sit here today, though, as Sean said, as the only female constitutional officer and the youngest SOS in the nation, because after coming out of court one day to do some non-billable work, I know my firm here will not be happy about that, but it's the non-billable work that led me here. It was helping a victim of domestic violence to obtain a DVO, so that the individual she stood across from in the courtroom, she didn't have to fear would find her or her daughter. She didn't speak much English. In fact, we had to have the aid of an interpreter in the courtroom with us to communicate with the judge. But when we did come out, and we were successful, it was the words that she was able to utter to me that led me to realize I could do more outside of the four walls of our law practice. She thanked me, holding back tears in her eyes, for finally feeling safe along with her daughter. It was then that I heard my mother, who uttered every day that my four sisters and I would go out to school, handing us the breakfast of champions, a Pop-Tart. In the back of my head, she would tell us five girls, it's Alyssa, Abby, Allison, Ashley, and Amy. Only in a Catholic family do we do that. Hey, you girls, make this the best day yet. And I was looking at my client, a woman who I had great respect for, utter these words, and I realized what she was saying, that Allison, you have to take a chance. You can't be afraid, and most importantly, if we're going to live each day and truly make it the best day, we got to be the change that we want to see in the world. So I took a risk and ran first race statewide, and I sit here today because so many here in this room, so many especially good-looking women across the Commonwealth, realized that we needed to have and must have a voice in Frankfort. And I'm honored to serve as Kentucky's 76th Secretary of State, and each and every day I'm better at my job because of you and the relationships that we've built along the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Treasurer Hollenbach.
My name is Todd Hollenbach, and I'm the State Treasurer of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. This is my first government job. I was raised in Louisville, Kentucky, went to both Catholic and public schools. I'm trained as an attorney. This October will be my 22nd wedding anniversary to my lovely wife, Rosemarie, who I met while I was working at the grill right here in Lexington at the University of Kentucky. She liked to eat a lot. I have two boys, 19 and 17. I was inspired to public service primarily by my grandmother. My grandmother, Winky, my father's mother, believed strongly in two things. She believed in the power of prayer and the importance of public service. Her love of public service inspired my father to run for office. My grandmother was a bit of a pioneer. Back in the 50s, she ran for a state legislative office. She didn't win. She ultimately, before she died at the age of approximately 80, served on the school board in Jefferson County. But anyway, her love of public service inspired my father. He ran for county judge, served 2 terms in Jefferson County. And I think community service, public service, is something that's kind of part of the culture here in Kentucky. And as a 7th generation of Kentuckians, my family's no different. So to the extent that I was inspired by anybody, it had to have started with my grandmother and then my father. I very much enjoy public service. I love what I do. I appreciate you all for the opportunity to be where I am.
Thank you. As expected, that took a little bit longer than we anticipated. Most of you were right on time, though. That question was one that I felt that you all might spend a little bit more time answering. But as we go forward, we have about an hour, so if you could keep it a little bit more brief on these answers, and I'm going to cut it down to asking these questions to a couple of selected folks as we go forward. Thank you. And I'm going to go around the table, and this time we'll start with Treasurer Hollenbach. Could you tell us what's the most exciting thing that's going on in your life today, either professionally or personally?
It would have to be of a personal nature. I mentioned my sons, Jacob and Reese. My oldest boy is a second-year student here at the University of Kentucky. He's pledging a fraternity this year, and he's just getting to that point where he's really starting to think about what he wants to do with his life. And it's gratifying that he's talking to me about it, and helping him work through that is something that just brings me all kinds of joy. And it's all about family for most of us. It is for me as well. My other child, my younger son, is a senior at Trinity High School in Louisville. And today, in fact, he's going to be, Trinity's an all-boy Catholic high school. He was asked to go to Sacred Heart, which is the adjacent all-girls Catholic high school today, to present to their volunteer organization. Mayor Fisher in Louisville is very big on volunteerism, and he started a Give a Day program where he tries to get everybody in the community to volunteer a day of public service. And the Catholic schools in Louisville, they encourage participation in public service events and, in fact, require it. But the mayor mentioned that the Catholic schools had not had the participation rates that the public schools had. And so my son, being privy to that conversation, decided to take up the gauntlet. I'm really, really proud of him. And he's trying to organize all the Catholic high schools throughout Louisville to see if we can't get a better participation rate. So he's going to be speaking to a group of girls today, which I don't think he minds doing too much. But it's just being a father to those two sons and watching them turn into young men that's the most exciting thing going on in my life right now.
Thank you. Secretary.
A grandmother on Twitter. Literally, each and every day is a new day. And this past weekend, she wanted to learn how to upload photos of herself to Twitter. So it is exciting when, technology, it is the information highway to how we communicate in our Office of Secretary of State with all Kentuckians. And I now have an 83-year-old grandmother who Facebooks and tweets, and it literally keeps me on my toes more than the press does. So it's a joy to get to see her interact, and most importantly, I know you introduced in the bio what my future aspirations and plans are, but I'm pretty sure, guys, sitting here at the table, she's going to be running for governor here later on, so you just better get prepared.
The most exciting thing going on in my life is I have 8-year-old twin boys, and they're a handful to be charitable, but they're getting to that fun age where they're getting interested, and one of my chief interests is reading history. And there is a young historian series that you can find at the bookstore. So the conversations in the car have gone from, now what do we have, ball practice tonight, to remind me, Dad, was Hitler a good guy or a bad guy? Hamilton, he was one of the bad guys, and he says, well, that would make Churchill the good guy. Absolutely, it would make Winston Churchill the good guy. So, I know most of us are parents up here. There really is this spark. When a little kid sort of develops their own personality and their own interest and the ability to read, that opens up a whole world for a whole host of the future. And you just hope that every kid sort of gets that kind of opportunity. And I'm working every day to make sure that they do. But the most exciting thing in my life is trying to keep up with twin 8-year-old boys.
Well, I hate to sound like a broken record here, but I'm a father as well, and whatever title I may have in my life, nothing will be as important as that of dad. I have a 4-year-old daughter, Eva, and a 2-year-old daughter, Alex, and it's just remarkable to me how different they are. My oldest daughter, when she falls down, she cries, and my youngest daughter falls down, she laughs. That's kind of the difference in their personality. They started back to school not too long ago. Actually, it was Alex's first time to go to preschool in 3-day twos. As I was dropping her off, 2 assistants at the preschool literally had to remove her. It took 2 assistants. One had her arms, the other had her legs, as she was wailing and screaming, prostrate, being carried into the preschool. The 4-year-old Eva came in the other day and told me that a little boy in her class, Beckman, had asked her to marry him. She couldn't get Beckman out of her head. I'm not without law enforcement resources, and I can assure you little Beckman is under surveillance by the Department of Criminal Investigations right now as we speak. But there's nothing like being a parent. And I will say this, if I had to answer it in a professional way, seeing the attitude adjustment and some of the numbers in this state finally change in the area of prescription painkiller abuse has been a really gratifying professional thing for me. So.
Commissioner Conway.
Well, personally, the most exciting thing in my life now are my 3 children. They've made the adjustment from moving from small town Tompkinsville to the big city of Frankfort. They've made a lot of friends, they're involved in school, they go to public schools there, they're very involved in sports, and I'm just real proud of the adjustment that my family made, because it's a big ordeal. Those of you that have moved when you were a young age know that's a big ordeal, and my kids made the transition very well, and I'm proud of them. Professionally, the most exciting thing going on is the changes we've made at the Department of Agriculture. And to travel the state, I was in all 120 counties last year. I will be in all 120 counties again this year, traveling around to the rural counties and seeing farmers come up to me and the excitement in their eye. You know, they say thank you for restoring credibility to that office. Thank you for the new initiatives you're doing, and it's real exciting for me because I've been a part of the agriculture community my whole life, and I think that people in the ag community appreciate a lot of the initiatives and the positive changes that we've made in the first year and 9 months in office.
Thank you. This question is directed towards Secretary Grimes and Attorney General Conway. You mentioned technology, Secretary, plays such a big role in today's society. How are you using technology in your office to serve your constituents?
Well, in trying to communicate with Kentuckians, you have to realize you're working in the Office of Secretary of State with our grandmas and grandpas down to our grandbabies, and everybody has a different way of obtaining information necessary, whether it be in our elections, which as Secretary of State, you serve as the chief election official, or in conducting business in the Commonwealth, and you serve as the chief business officer, or in serving as a chief advocate for civic engagement, and really getting people to realize how they can be engaged politically, how they can be socially connected and engaged in their community. And when I came into the Office of Secretary of State, we realized, first off, 2 things. One, our website was very much outdated. People were having a hard time understanding what the office did, how it worked, and most importantly, interacting. And as I sit here today, we have a totally revamped website which incorporates our business one-stop portal so that business owners can literally begin their business online. And when we say the Commonwealth is open for business, we mean that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In regards to voter registration, our voter registration database, we have 4.3 million Kentuckians here approximately in the state, a little over 3 million on our voter registration rolls. It was on a mainframe system, a system that when you go in a county clerk's office, it's a big boxy computer, nothing that looks like any tablet or PC or any handheld device that anybody really utilizes and walks around with today. It was impairing our county clerk's ability to run elections efficiently and effectively. And elections don't happen overnight. We prepare literally months and years in advance for what occurs. This year's an off-election cycle, but in a primary and a general election. It is the biggest day for our consumers, and we want it to work the best, at its highest performance level. So getting in a place where we could update our voter registration system has been something that has been a priority since day one when I took the oath in 2012. And we are getting in a place where we are going to be able to launch our new voter registration system. Obviously, technology, I mentioned my grandmother, it's key, Facebook and Twitter, with being able to interact with your constituents. And we are able to do that now effectively with an updated website and making sure that the presence that we have, it's not just in Frankfort, a lot of the work that we do, our doors are open at the Capitol every day, with exception of the weekends, but we are now available online and able to interact with Kentuckians from Boone, Kitten, and Campbell to Pikeville, all the way down to Paducah, and it does make a difference to be able to get positive feedback from those that you are working to serve.
Thank you. General Conway.
Well, obviously, technology is an important part of what we all do. In the Office of the Attorney General, we're doing much of the same things. We've updated our website. It's accessible and easy to use for mobile devices. Obviously, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, at a press conference yesterday, and it was live streamed out to people who wanted to follow us. So we're certainly doing all of that. Additionally, I created a cybercrimes unit when I became Attorney General. I did it because too many of our kids were being solicited online and because law enforcement needed help. I'll never forget talking to the sheriff down in McCracken County when I was running in 2007, and he said, "Jack, I've got a big case." And I sent a hard drive off to Frankfurt, and it's been a year, and it's still not returned to us with it having been processed. And so we really went to work on that issue. The cybercrimes unit is incredibly staffed. They do it very efficiently. But in the last few years, they have processed about 7,000 hard drives and mobile devices and been able to use that information in the courts of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You send us a hard drive, we'll get it back to a law enforcement agency in about a week. In addition, that cybercrimes unit has taken more than 400,000 child porn images off of the internet. We've been able to do it because some of the changes we made in the law. We were granted administrative subpoena authority, which allows us to be more efficient. So if we're seeing a large volume of child porn images being traded online, rather than having to go to the grand jury, we can go directly to the internet service provider and say, here's what we see, tell us who this is. And that allows us to be much, much more efficient when it comes to our investigations. Thirdly, what leaps to mind is the fact that we were the agency that brought electronic warrants statewide. You used to see in a lot of our counties, particularly our rural counties that are often neglected, service rates on warrants of about 20%. We applied for and received a $4.5 million federal grant, and where we had electronic warrants in some of our urban areas, we took them to another 113 counties around the state. So the state now is on an electronic warrant system. And what's that mean? Yes, it means that your rates of service of a warrant have gone from about 20% to about 80%. But it also means that law enforcement is safer. Because if you have a cop out there on the beat that pulls someone over, it used to be they'd have to call into the dispatcher, is there a paper warrant out? Maybe it was missing. Well, what this officer can now do, because we not only went to electronic warrants, but we've supplied some mobile data terminals to the cars, right there from their car, they can check for outstanding warrants not only in their county, in other counties, which they used to not be able to do. They can look for felonies on the national system, and that makes cops a heck of a lot safer, and that makes law enforcement more efficient.
Thank you. Next question is addressed to Treasurer Hollenbach, Auditor Edelen, Commissioner Comer. Everyone seems to be doing more with less these days. I think in government, outside of government. Less money, less staff involved. Tell us how that philosophy has affected your operations in your office, Treasurer Hollenbach.
Well, doing more with less is a way of life these days. If there ever was a time that you could roll into Frankfurt with big ideas, get the legislature to fund it, and roll it out statewide, those days are behind us. People don't elect you to go to Frankfurt, though, and to Portsmouth that talk about how tight things are. And while my office is operating with about 25% less resources now than when I first took office, the fact of the matter is the demands on the office are greater than they've ever been. So we started off by trying to be as efficient as we could in the way we run the office, and I think we're running one of the most efficient offices in state government now. But in terms of bringing value-added services back to people, we had to find ways to do it that didn't cost the taxpayers any additional money. And so we dove in on our Treasure Finders program. This is our program to return unclaimed property to the people of the Commonwealth. And what we're doing is we're going out, taking it to the people. Treasure Finders is a proactive outreach where we'll go into a community with a list of claimants whose last known address was within the boundaries of that community. We get people who know their friends and neighbors well to help us locate them and let them know that they've got abandoned property that's sitting for them in the state treasury. We've been immensely successful with this proactive outreach that depends upon the volunteerism of good Kentuckians. In fact, during my administration, we've returned almost 1/4 of all the money ever returned in the unclaimed property program over its almost 100-year history. And I'm really, really proud of that. But when times are tight economically, it's not just government that is gasping. Obviously, the people have more demands and more needs. So we put together a series of job fairs in some of the most economically depressed regions of Kentucky. Again, all based on volunteers. In fact, we partnered with a lot of chambers of commerce out in the state to help us put these on, to try to address the issue of jobs, do what we could. We've been going into high schools all over the state, putting on financial literacy programs geared toward high school seniors so that people can make better financial decisions and not get themselves into financial trouble. Anything that deals with money, we believe at Treasury, we have an opportunity to insert ourselves because people expect their treasurer to be involved. All these programs have at their core that they're volunteer-based, don't cost the taxpayers any money, and so that's kind of how we've addressed it.
Thank you. Auditor Edelen.
You know, Kentucky is a poor state, and a poor state doesn't have the luxury of being dumb. And when every dollar we lose to inefficiency or corruption or abuse or duplication is a dollar that we can't invest in making sure our young people get the world-class system of education that will help them compete in a global economy. It's a dollar that we can't use to put the infrastructure in place that facilitates economic growth. It's a dollar that we don't have to make sure that the greatest generation gets to age with dignity. So in the auditor's office, as your taxpayer watchdog, this is the question that we wrestle with every day. And Sean, we answer it with the following action. We do big things. Kentucky isn't going to be turned around by nibbling at the edges. It's not going to be turned around by bashful decisions or the politics of incrementalism. What it means is we have to take on an aggressive approach to modernization and reform in this state. And we've tried to model that behavior in the 2 years that I've been state auditor. You know, the two biggest things that we do in Kentucky are education and Medicaid. When I came into office, you remember Jamie Comer and I worked together in the first week, and that sort of took that up. But the second week, I asked the question of my staff. I said, who audits our $6 billion Medicaid program? And I want to meet the team that is in charge of reviewing the operation of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, which is a third of the operation of state government in terms of budget and staff. And I said, I want this meeting at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock rolled around, and one very talented lady came to the door, and I laughed, and I said, which team are you? And she said, Adam, I'm both. Folks, that's a dumb approach. We have more people on Medicaid than we have kids in public schools. And while all of us are willing to do our part to make sure that we are our brother's keeper, that there is a safety net in place, certainly those of us who pay this extraordinary level of taxation have a right to an efficient system that produces a state that does a better job of manufacturing educated people than it does poor and unhealthy people. So forming a Medicaid accountability and transparency unit that evaluates not only actions of our Medicaid program, but that cabinet in real time to make sure you're getting what you pay for is a critical component of my tenure as state auditor. The other is education. You know, no other auditor had ever gotten in the education space. Yet 40% of what we have in the general fund goes to feed education, and almost everything you pay in property tax goes to support education. The state share is $2.7 billion, and what we have a right to expect, particularly before we invest more in education, is a system that does a good job of preparing kids to compete in a global economy. And when we have example after example of educational bureaucracies getting larger, at the same time resources to the classroom are being diminished, we have a huge problem. Folks, I caught a former superintendent in the Dayton School District in northern Kentucky, fewer than 1,000 kids, 90% of whom are on free and reduced lunch. I caught this guy stealing about $250,000. There has got to be a consequence for stealing from kids, particularly poor ones. And if we fail to make sure that we have a system of education that is efficient and effective, if we fail to do that, we have written the suicide note for this state. We'll continue to muddle around in mediocrity. Well, I think we can do better than that. And what that means is that our leadership has to be value-driven, but our management style has to be data-driven. And our ability to track and guarantee that people are getting the return on investment and getting the bad guys out of the system, I think, is an extraordinary part of this job, and I'm happy to get to do it.
Thank you. Commissioner Comer.
One thing I think we all agree on in this room is government in the future is going to have to do more with less. And I'll give you two specific examples of things we've done at the Department of Agriculture. First of all, we've reduced waste, fraud, and abuse significantly in the Department of Agriculture. As Adam mentioned, the first thing that I did when I went into office was call for an audit. And during the transition period between my election and when I took office, it was apparent that there were a lot of things the Department of Agriculture was required to do statutorily that, for various reasons, wasn't getting done. A lot of people don't realize the Kentucky Department of Agriculture is the largest regulatory agency in the state government. We do a lot of things besides agriculture. 40% of our department is a regulatory agency. We regulate all the fuel pumps in the state, the scales and the scanners, the amusement rides, fertilizers, pesticides, the seeds, granaries. We inspect eggs in the grocery store, and the list goes on and on and on of things that we're required to do by statute. So we went in and started evaluating why this wasn't getting done. Of course, obviously, a lot of the employees were saying, well, we didn't have enough money, we needed more employees, and all this and that. And we changed the culture in the Department of Agriculture. Before, the employees were setting their own schedules of where they would go if they worked out in the field. They would, well, I'm going to go to Mason today and check a fuel pump, and I'm going to go to Meade County tomorrow and check a fuel pump. We set the schedule for them to make the employees accountable. We put GPS units on every vehicle in the fleet at the Department of Agriculture, 181 vehicles in the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. Every vehicle has a GPS unit, and every employee knows that we have a GPS unit. As a result, we inspected more, this is just one example, we inspected more fuel pumps over a 12-week period this summer than the Farmer Administration inspected in all of 2011. So we've cross-trained our employees, and we did it with 2 less employees. We've cross-trained our employees. Before, all they did, this division or this branch, would be inspect fuel pumps. We can get them all inspected in 12 weeks now. You're going to then move over and start inspecting scales and scanners. And we've been fought every step of the way as we've done this. Not by every employee. Most of the employees were great employees in the department. But I think as the audit revealed, and as you have probably read in the newspaper, there were issues of accountability with employees. So that's reduced a lot of expenses. We burned 1,000 less gallons of gas last year. And we got everything inspected in 1 year, and before it was taking 2 and 3 years. So that's become much more efficient, huge savings to the taxpayers. Another thing we did that should be of great interest to the business community, we've privatized a lot of services in the Department of Agriculture. For example, the fuel testing lab that we had, when I walked in there were 9 employees testing fuel for the state. That was it was hemorrhaging money, losing about $1 million a year. Today there are 0 employees in that division. It's gone. And we didn't move them into other slots. They're gone. We've contracted with a private company. We're saving the taxpayers $600,000 a year, and we surplused that fuel lab equipment last week. And that equipment brought more than what the state initially paid for it 6 years ago. And we're going to return that money to the taxpayer. So those are 2 examples of how we're trying to do more with less every day at the department. I think we're succeeding in that.
Thank you. This question directed to Attorney General Conway, Treasurer Hollenbach, and Commissioner Comer. What are you doing to engage a younger generation of Kentuckians in your office? And in addition, what do you feel is the most concern to young Kentuckians these days? General Conway?
Well, ever since I first entered public life in an unsuccessful race for Congress in 2002, I've had a lot of support and have drawn a lot of energy from the young people that have worked with me and for me. And to that end, today in the Office of the Attorney General, if you look at my Chief Deputy, my Assistant Deputy AG for the civil side, Assistant Deputy AG for the criminal side, my Communications Director, most of my senior staff, I think they're 42 or under. So we have a fairly youthful staff that keeps me on my toes. In the words of Al Cross, I do have some gray eminence in the office to make certain that we have some historical perspective, but I have always looked for opportunities to promote young people. Additionally, in order to engage young people, on the issue of prescription painkillers, we haven't just done a law enforcement job. We haven't just said, okay, we're going to do the legislative fix in Frankfurt. I've literally gone on the road with two parents who lost their children to prescription drug overdoses. And we've been in front of nearly 30,000 kids around this state. And I've done it because I'm sick and tired of hearing from so many people and so many employers like you that we've lost an entire generation to prescription painkiller abuse. My thought was, if we've lost a generation, let's go to the next one. And let's talk to them about being different and making different choices than many of their parents have. And I can't get some of the stories of these kids out of my head. I mean, I was in Boyd County a couple years ago, and a little girl raised her hand at the end of one of these presentations. She was in 9th or 10th grade. She said, Mr. Conway, is it better off if you have a problem to be in jail or to be in treatment? And, you know, I kind of thumped my chest a little bit as the Attorney General and said, well, I can assure you the beds are warmer in treatment than the cold beds in jail. And folks, this little girl came up to me after it was over and she was crying. She said, Mr. Conway, I asked you that question because my dad and my sister were going to Florida and bringing pills back, and now they're in jail. And she just wanted a shoulder to cry on. Or I think of a little girl in Winchester not long ago who told me their parents were pill heads that left her. She went to live with her aunt and uncle. They died, and now she was living with her cousins, but she didn't want to be like them. Or a little girl in Pikeville that broke down in one of these seminars because she'd gone home on the bus 2 weeks prior, and there's an ambulance outside of her home because her dad had just OD'd and died. I've tried to reach out and touch the next generation of Kentuckians in a public education effort because it's going to take a while to fix this problem. And the damage, the collateral damage is significant. And when you ask me what the greatest challenge facing young people in Kentucky is, it's the cost of higher education. It's one of the reasons I've tried to do what I've done on the for-profit colleges. It's one of the reasons I'm focused on the issue. Folks, since 1985, the cost of public higher education in this country has gone up 500%. 500%. That's more than double the uptick during the same time period for health insurance and gasoline. We cannot continue to have a state where only 16% of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher. And if we're going to help educate our way to a more prosperous tomorrow, we have to stop pricing higher education out of the reach of most families and most young people.
Treasurer Hollenbach.
We're trying to engage young people by going where they're spending their time these days. We are very active now in social media. A lot of young people don't read newspapers anymore. We're required to advertise our unclaimed property program every year, and historically it had been newspapers. We got a waiver, and this year we started using Google and other mediums that they are looking at, that they are picking up. We're active on Facebook, Twitter. Told you we've engaged Google. We're taking government to the people. A lot of the programs I spoke about earlier are programs that we take out to the counties, and they're volunteer-based, and we're trying to reach out to young people and get them engaged so they can see government at work, they can see government delivering services, they can see government working in an efficient and effective way. I think that young people they're gripped by uncertainty today. I mentioned that I have a son who's in college now. Obviously, the economy, the divisiveness that they see coming out of Washington, D.C., and sometimes out of Frankfurt, jobs are important. You know, they're all thinking, how am I going to get a job? What am I going to do to get a job? How am I going to pay for the education that I'm going to need to be able to qualify for that job? So I think that to the extent that there are young people starting to pay attention now, we're just trying to make sure we're in areas that they're going to see us actively providing services to people and trying to get the people's business done.
Thank you. And Commissioner Comer?
Thank you. My focus as Ag Commissioner with respect to young people is around agriculture and rural economic development. We have two dilemmas in those categories. First of all, with agriculture, the average age of the farmer in Kentucky continues to increase. That's not a good sign for the future. So I'm trying to inspire a new generation of young people to be involved in production agriculture. We're really pushing food processors, Kentucky Proud businesses around the state that process food and are growing food to supply the local food movement in Louisville and in Lexington. It's a great opportunity. The young people have more open minds towards that type of new new thinking and that new economy with respect to agriculture than the older people. So I've developed a very close relationship with our colleges of agriculture around the state: UK, Eastern, Moorhead, Kentucky State, Berea, St. Catherine, Western, Murray. I know most of the leading ag majors in those schools, know all the professors. We have a close relationship with the FFA and the agriculture teachers around the state, the 4-H, the 4-H agents. Every county has a cooperative extension service, so we work closely with young people. We have an intern program that we started at the department, and you can't believe how many applications we have for that. And they're top notch, and we're real excited, and we want to develop these young people to be the future leaders in agriculture. With respect to rural economic development, one of the biggest problems that we have in rural communities, and I'm born and raised in Monroe County, is the best and brightest young people graduate from high school and they move off and they get educated and they don't ever come back. And we call that a brain drain. And if we want to enhance and revitalize our rural communities, we have to have these sharp young people come back to these rural communities. So we're trying to inspire young people from rural communities to come back to their rural communities and play a leading role in the community, open a business, be involved in the community, be involved in government, go to church, start a family, take a investment stake in your community and make a difference there. So those are two things we're trying to do to inspire a new generation of Kentuckians.
Thank you. This question's for all. We'll try to have a shorter answer for this one. How do you all get your news these days? I mean, again, a lot of talk about technology. How do you get your news? And are you an iPod user or an iPhone user, BlackBerry user, or do you use some other type of device?
I use iPhone, get most of my news from Twitter, and I have Google Alerts emailed to me.
Sometimes it's, Sean, it feels like it's my staff running into the door saying, "You're not going to believe what just happened now." No, in all seriousness, I'm an iPhone user. I love it. I find it convenient, keep pictures of my kids on it very easily. I get my news now more from my iPad or my computer. I keep up NBC News as a homepage. I tend to read the Washington Post online every day.
Writer, and just see if I can carry it around in my pocket. I'm an all of the above. I'm a news junkie. I start in the morning watching a bunch of news programs. I monitor and look for updates through the day. I too have a staff that's hyper connected. But I'm kind of old school. I still like newspapers, and apparently I'm also the last newspaper reader in the state. But I like the feel of the paper. I think it's a great way to get the news, and I also appreciate long-form journalism, which I think has sort of become a lost art. But the ability to drill down and beyond get the simple talking points, to be able to drill down into the meat of something and to have context, particularly as policymakers, I think is extraordinarily important. So I also read a lot of history for that. So I'm an all-of-the-above information junkie.
Well, I think it's interesting to see the differences in what media you are looking at, what's highlighted as the top news story of the day. My morning begins with reading the papers, and it's not just one or two. Here in Kentucky, we have a lot of great daily and weekly publications that come out as well, where you really find out what's going on in each of our counties. Then throughout the day, I will tell you that TweetDeck is one of my favorite friends. I can see what's going on not just here in the state of Kentucky, but across the nation, and obviously wrapping up at the end of the day with the newscasts, and not just the national newscasts, but literally the local newscasts, and looking at all of our different affiliates is what keeps me well informed. And obviously a grandmother on Twitter, she knows before I do everything that's going on.
Newspaper, television, radio, internet. I also take advantage of the fact that I'm blessed to be able to work in Frankfurt every day, where a lot of people are interested in the news, and I talk to a lot of people. I get a lot of news there. Of course, you have to use the old, I guess it was Ronald Reagan who said, trust but verify, when you're taking it word of mouth. But you can learn a lot just by talking to informed people in Frankfurt about the news.
Thank you. And we've run over a little bit on time for all of the questions that I wanted to ask. That's not too surprising, but what I want to do is ask a couple of final questions here that'll be directed more at the Lexington business community or Central Kentucky business community, and just ask everyone generally, and we'll start with Secretary Grimes and then Auditor Edelen, and then we'll move around the table. What are you all doing to improve the business climate for Kentucky?
Well, here in the state of Kentucky, we can't just talk about keeping our doors open for business. We have to literally do that. And since taking office, we've tried to tackle the problem that business owners face, which is inefficient government in several ways. The first and foremost is making sure that the laws that are on the books are actually consistent with what court precedent is. And believe it or not, we actually have a lot of laws that aren't up to date with what our judges determine business owners are to follow. So that's first and foremost. Second is actually making sure that we are exciting businesses to come here to form and operate in the state of Kentucky. And I was proud and continue to be proud of the work, bipartisan work that we do, not just with fellow constitutional officers. Commissioner Comer is one, developing the ability for a new generation cooperative, for instance, for our agriculture community to not only grow the wheat, but then to bring in minority investors and to turn that wheat into bread and have a bakery for them to sell it. That's how we are going to literally keep Kentucky going and growing. Last, it is making sure that we're analyzing the current processes and practices that are already in place and making them better. A prime example is without the aid of many of the legislators that are sitting here in this room, which if we can give them a round of applause, they are the ones that help to shape our policy around here in the Commonwealth. And this year we've been able to continue in that same vein in terms of agriculture, giving a tax incentive to our farmers to actually donate their food to our food banks to feed the over 750,000 food insecure Kentuckians we have. That's good business practice and helping Kentuckians, literally helping Kentuckians. Additionally, last year, we were able to pass House Bill 277. It makes paying your occupational license tax an actual realistic ability. Before, we would have business owners, many of whom I'm sure are in this room, where they, one, could not locate the form. We have numerous taxing jurisdictions throughout the state, so they couldn't locate the form. And two, after calling or driving or faxing to get these forms, they would then have to hire a CPA to help to fill out these forms, which oftentimes they were paying CPAs more than was due and deserved to state government. We were able, with House Bill 277, under the leadership of former Speaker Jody Richards, to pass a bipartisan piece of legislation that passed unanimously in the House and the Senate that, one, creates a central portal in the Office of Secretary of State, where we have now collected all of those forms so that the business owners don't have to go on a trail hunt for those forms. But then second, a uniform form is in the process of being created so that from our small business owners to our large business owners, they can easily comply with the business regulations that are required here in the Commonwealth. It's not just talking the talk, it's actually walking the walk, so that when we say Kentucky is open for business, we mean it not just on the books, but in practice as well.
Thank you.
You know, I'm fortunate in that because of my business background, I know instinctively that the big impediments to economic growth are a bloated government that takes a lot from you and doesn't always provide the most efficient services that you need and often gets in your way. And then secondly, making sure that I believe the biggest impediment to economic growth in central Kentucky and all over Kentucky is the absence of a skilled workforce. And this is where we have got to be, folks. Our destiny is going to be driven, I don't want to offend the liberal arts majors, but not by poetry majors, folks. It's going to be driven by an education system that understands the dynamic needs of the for-profit private sector and works to fulfill those needs. I saw Kim Sweezy here a little earlier. I was at Toyota a couple of weeks ago. And at Toyota, what's limiting Toyota's growth is that they don't have enough people coming in who are prepared to work on the line at Toyota. So Toyota is sponsored with many others a advanced manufacturing academy. And what happens in this academy is they take bright and talented youngsters who don't want to go to college but do want to be contributing members of society, and it puts them through an apprenticeship program that takes about 14 months, and before they're 20 years old, they're making a salary of $55,000 a year. You know, I think it's awfully attractive when people can provide for their families and pay taxes and be able to and take care of their children and afford health care. The reason why this system had to be put into place is because currently our schools don't have the money to transport young people who are in their senior years of high school across counties to this program. Now, folks, government ought to be a vehicle to bring people to opportunity. And when we don't have the money, because resources are too scarce, to make sure that young people who want to have a middle-class living are able to get that training, that represents the future of Kentucky. So as state auditor, I'm working to make sure that every school district in Kentucky gets the message that the bureaucratic growth has to slow, that resources have to get to the classroom where they affect the kind of future and dynamic business climate that we want here. But you can't do it without folks who aren't prepared to compete in a global economy. I don't care whether you're in retail, whether you're in restaurants, whether you're in research, or whether you're in any other part of the economy. We have got to have folks who have 21st century skill sets ready to consume, buy, and produce. And that's not where we are yet in Kentucky.
Thank you. Commissioner Comer.
Thank you. Two things that we're focused on in the department. Number one, we're focused on job creation. Rural economic development's a big part of what we do now at the department. Those of you in Lexington, you should be very frustrated with your tax dollars you send to Frankfort. You subsidize a lot of rural communities around the state, like the communities that I represented in the Kentucky General Assembly. But I think that there is hope for those rural communities to be more self-sufficient, and I think agriculture is part of that. We should have more food processors in the state. We're working every day trying to get new companies to come into the state, companies that are already processing to expand. We're using the mighty brand, the Kentucky Proud brand, to have new initiatives like our Utterly Kentucky Milk project in Somerset, our Kentucky Proud Homegrown by Heroes project, which is centered mainly right now in eastern Kentucky. We're working closely with food processors. We're breaking ribbons almost on a weekly basis with new food processors all over the state. I was with Mayor Fisher in Louisville, and we have a lot of promising prospects there. We're in Graves County last week. I'll be in Morgan County in a couple of weeks on a new food processor. It's going to employ 35 people. I think that we're working with our Kentucky Proud Farm to Campus initiative to try to get universities to buy more local food and contract with processors that are trying to get started and expand. These processors almost always are located in rural communities, and in order to enhance and revitalize rural communities, we've got to have more manufacturing in those rural communities, because that's one thing we can debate NAFTA all day long, but it was very hard on rural communities in the state. I think overall it was a positive thing, especially for agriculture, but for rural communities it's been hard. So we're focused on creating jobs in rural communities. Also, we want to set the example at the Department of Agriculture by being pro-business, by actually making employees accountable, being efficient, doing more with less. So when we look ahead to the future of Kentucky, we see there are a lot of issues that we're going to have to confront head on. Issues I think have been delayed, kicked the can down the road, whatever you want to say. This Medicaid expansion, it's a very noble thing, but that's 300,000 new people on Medicaid. Somebody's going to have to pay for that. And they're going to have to be more employees hired for state government to administer that. So when we talk about tax reform in the future, I think that we want to be able to say at the Department of Agriculture, we were more efficient, we did reduce our workforce, we did do more with less. So those are a couple of things that we're working on.
And I'm gonna change the play. We got about 5 minutes left, and these are working folks, I know, and have to go back to work today. So I'm gonna go to the last question, and again, just as brief as you can. What is it that you would most like to accomplish for the next generation of Kentuckians before you leave public service? And General Conway, I'll start with you, and then Hollenbach, we'll go with you next, okay? Thanks.
That's a very broad question, obviously. I would like I'm going to answer, I'm going to give myself two things here. Obviously, many of you know that we have gone after some corporate bad actors in the state. The people in this room, 99% of all businesses are trying to do the right thing. But we have gone after some bad corporate actors. And we're in the process of trying to hold a few pharmaceutical companies accountable for some of the damage they've caused here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky over the last 15 or 20 years. And if we have a positive outcome from that litigation, if we could get a judge to sign off on it and create a trust to use the money toward treatment in this state for treatment of residential treatment for opioid and other types of drug abuse, I think that would be important because we have only about 10% of the treatment beds that we need. The other thing I'd like to talk about, related to what Adam said, is we need a more educated and skilled workforce. You know, we've got 3 applicants for every job opening. We've got an unemployment rate a point above the national average. Yet you talk to a lot of business leaders and they're ready to hire if they can only find the people that match the jobs. We in the future ought to be sitting down, getting our business schools together with elected leaders, with educational leaders to say, how do we work and train the next generation of workers for tomorrow? Because what we're doing right now is not working. And I sort of see this as higher education 2.0, but we need to make certain that we don't have student loan debt, surpassing credit card debt, and doing all of the things that we're continuing to doing to make education less attainable when it ought to be more attainable.
Treasurer Hollenbach.
I would like to do my part to make sure that Kentucky is the kind of place where younger generations will want to stay and will have the opportunities to be able to stay. I think that the best way that we can get there is comprehensive tax reform. I think that tax reform is one of those things, it's not a question of when, or it's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. And I believe that we need to do everything we can to make it a more business-friendly tax code, a flatter and fairer tax code. And I think that that's probably the single best thing that the policymakers could do at this point to turn around the environment and put us on the right footing going forward. We need to make this community, which is a great community, has so much going for it, but we need to make sure that opportunities are here so that people that want to stay here can, and people who are looking for opportunities will want to come here.
Thank you.
In terms of responsibilities as Secretary of State, I think each of us wants to leave our office in better shape than we found it. We want to make a mark. We want to, as my mama said, make this the best day yet, truly, with our office. For me, in terms of an answer to a question that I received, this is what my work is daily. It's to make sure that no soldier, no sailor, no airman, no Marine, no National Guard, no Coast Guard, no 65,000 man or woman from the Commonwealth of Kentucky that is fighting for the very right we exercise on Election Day ever has to question, as they did when I traveled to the Middle East last year, Secretary, does my vote actually count? We have worked very hard in the Office of Secretary of State to make sure that our ballot box is open to all eligible Kentuckians, working especially with those with disabilities, to every facet of life. And here in Kentucky, we have over 350,000 veterans. Thanks to many in our legislature, both in the House and the Senate, who were willing to stand up with me, we were able to stand shoulder to shoulder with those 65,000 men and women and pass Kentucky's first ever military heroes voting initiative this past session, Senate Bill 1, which makes sure that they can update their registration online, they will receive their ballot electronically, and we are currently studying the ability for them to return their ballot electronically to us once completed, so that when things like Superstorm Sandy get in the way of cargo planes bringing those ballots back from the Middle East, we can make sure that those that are fighting on the battlefield have their voice heard at the ballot box.
Thank you. Well, we've come to the end of our discussion. This is a business-oriented group, so it's good that they are able to get back to work. I hope you all have enjoyed this discussion today and that you learned a little bit.
We've got to work too, Sean.
I just hope I can get out of the chair after. But again, I thank you all so much for being here today. Please give them a round of applause. We were able to get off stump speeches at least a little bit today and maybe learn one or two things that we didn't know before we walked into the door. Again, we know your time is valuable, and thank you so much for being here today. Carla, if you want to go ahead and close the day.
Thanks. Commissioner Comer, General Conway, Auditor Edelen, Secretary Grimes, Treasurer Hollenbach, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your leadership and service. And as a point of personal privilege, I'd like to thank Auditor Edelen for his quest to make the BlackBerry cool again, so I don't have to walk around in shame. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks especially to our sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. Stay tuned for next events that will be upcoming, and have a safe drive back to work.